Nobody tells you this. The brain you have at 60 is neurologically superior to the one you had at 25. Not weaker, superior. More connected, more emotionally stable, more capable of meaning. Science has proven it. Culture just forgot to mention it. The cultural myth that life peaks early. What advertising, social media, and pop culture get completely wrong about aging. There is a story our culture tells over and over so consistently that most of us have never thought to question it. The story goes like this. You are born, you grow, you peak somewhere in your 20s, and then you begin to decline. We see it in every anti-aging advertisement. We hear it in the phrase over the hill. We feel it in the quiet panic of a 40th birthday. But here is what that story leaves out. The neuroscience. Decades of longitudinal research, and the lived testimony of people across cultures who report, with striking consistency, that the best years of their lives came later, not earlier. This video is about that evidence, not motivation, not fiction, science. Because as it turns out, life doesn't get emptier with age. Under the right conditions, it gets more full. In the 1960s, psychologist Raymond Cattell split intelligence into two types. Fluid intelligence, the raw speed of processing new information, does slow with age. That part is true. But crystallized intelligence, the accumulated judgment, pattern recognition, and nuanced wisdom built through lived experience, grows. In most people, it keeps growing well into their 70s. An older doctor isn't working with a diminished mind. They are working with a mind refined by decades into something more powerful than raw speed alone, judgment. Research from UCLA documented what is now called the positivity effect. When shown threatening or joyful images, older adults' brains pay measurably less attention to the negative ones. This is not denial. Brain scans confirm it. The amygdala, the brain's alarm system, becomes more selective with age. It learns to save its energy for what actually matters. The result? Fewer emotional swings, faster recovery from setbacks, less control by the opinions of others. This is not resignation, this is neurological maturation. In 1946, Viktor Frankl emerged from 4 Nazi concentration camps, including Auschwitz, having lost his wife, his parents, and his manuscript. He had also arrived at the central conclusion of his life's work. Meaning is not found. It is constructed from the raw material of experience, including suffering, loss, and the confrontation with mortality. And that construction takes time. Research from Stanford's Center on Longevity shows that the capacity for meaning, not happiness, not pleasure, but meaning, increases with age. It requires 4 things that cannot be rushed. Perspective. Seeing your circumstances within the arc of an entire life, not just the urgency of right now. Acceptance, the peace that comes from having survived what once felt unsurvivable. Legacy, knowing that your presence has shaped others in ways you may never fully see. Release, the freedom from constantly performing a self and the discovery of what remains when the performance stops. Young people have energy, ambition, and optionality, but almost none of them have these 4 things. Not because they lack character, but because these can only be earned through living. Here is a paradox that troubled researchers for years. Older adults, people in their 60s and beyond, consistently reported higher emotional well-being than people in their 20s. How? They had less time, less physical ability, and more loss. The answer came from Stanford psychologist Laura Carstensen. Her socio-emotional selectivity theory, developed over 30 years, found that our perception of time directly determines what we prioritize. When time feels unlimited, we tolerate relationships that don't nourish us, defer joy, chase novelty, and spread ourselves wide. When time feels finite, we move toward what matters and away from what doesn't. We become, paradoxically, more alive. The U-curve of happiness, documented across 72 countries by economists Blanchflower and Oswald, confirms this. Happiness declines through the middle decades, bottoms out around age 47, then rises, often surpassing the highs of youth. The middle years absorb our greatest disappointments, the career that didn't become what we imagined, the gap between the life we planned at 22 and the one we actually have. But something happens on the other side of that grief. We stop measuring ourselves against lives we didn't live and begin, perhaps for the first time, to actually inhabit the one we do. The Harvard study of adult development is the longest longitudinal study of human life ever conducted. Started in 1938, it has tracked participants and their children for nearly 90 years. Its most celebrated director, psychiatrist George Vallon, distilled the findings into one sentence: happiness is love, full stop. Not achievement, not wealth, not even health in isolation. The depth of human relationships was, across 80 years of data, the single most powerful predictor of a long and meaningful life. And deep relationships take time. They are built in crises, survived together, in boring Tuesday evenings, in the argument that nearly ended everything and didn't. The richest relationships aren't 3 years old, they're 30. Separately, the Berlin Aging Study found that most very old adults reported not bitterness or regret, but a sense of integrity, a feeling that their lives had been their own, had mattered, and were, in some essential way, complete. And perhaps most counterintuitive of all, post-traumatic growth, emerging stronger and wiser from adversity, is more common than post-traumatic stress, and it becomes more common with age. The people who have been through the most are not, as a group, the most broken. They are, statistically, among the most wise. Here is the reframe this video is asking you to consider. Aging is not a countdown to an ending. It is a completion of something that was always building toward this. The struggles of your 20s were not wasted years. They were raw material. The failures, the grief, the confusion, none of it was noise. All of it was data, being slowly processed into something no younger version of you was yet equipped to hold. If you are young, stop treating life as a rehearsal. The habits of depth and presence that make later life meaningful are built now. Every relationship you invest in, every hard conversation you don't avoid, you are constructing the architecture you will one day live in. If you are in midlife, you may be near the bottom of the curve. What the research tells us is that the bottom is not the end of the story. It is where the most important reevaluation begins. And if you are older, what you carry, the perspective, the pattern recognition, the hard-won emotional fluency, is not a lesser version of what you once had. It is something different, and in every dimension that matters, something more. The neuroscience confirms it, the longitudinal data confirms it, the testimony of those who have lived it confirms it. Life does not get smaller with age, it gets more precise. And precision in the end is just another word for meaning.